Hi guys, thank you for joining the live stream. Hope the audio is coming fine. For those of you who don't know, I think most 99.99% of my viewers on my channel know that who is Sitaram Goel. For that one or two people who don't know who Sitaram Goel is, for them I will just give a basic introduction. He is a historian, philosopher, thinker, intellectual, and academic, and one time, for a small while, even a politician, because he was almost standing in an election for some party before even BJP and all were created, as far as I remember. But mostly, he should be remembered as the intellectual of whom we never made a use out of. Basically, he's the most underrated, most forgotten thinker in Indian history. What his legacy has been is the most unfair, and the amount of wealth and depth of knowledge he has versus the amount of recognition he has is absolutely inversely proportional. So this book, two-volume book, one is written by him completely, one is a compilation of essays and articles by other people as well, people whom are on the thumbnail with him, Sitaram Goel, is the main book which gave Hindus sort of an intellectual and data-based, evidence-based voice to say that there were so many Hindu temples that had been demolished during the Islamic invasions, and which, because of this book, we can say that maybe someday we can hope to have them back. Now, the first, the people who helped Sitaram Goel with this is one other legendary intellectual and even advisor to PM Atal Bihari Vajpayee, is Arun Shourie. He was the first one who discovered that the Quran that is in English and the Quran that is in Arabic or Farsi is different in interesting areas, okay? And then there's the legendary economist of BJP, whose policies BJP basically is heading towards, or is employing mostly. It's a mix between Amartya Sen's economics and this person, Jay Dubashi, okay? He is one of the contributors to this collection of essays and articles and research. And the other person is Narain, another historian. So we start this book. The first one is hardly about 200 pages. The volume 2 is about 500 pages. The only thing we are not going to read from this book is just the list of the temples, okay? Which, according to him, there are evidences that they might have been destroyed to be built into mosques, okay? Because there are pages after pages of random small temples and mosques here and there all across the country, so we are not going to read that. If you are from any particular state and you wish to know the names of the exact temple or mosque, and if you have some query about the history of the local mosque near you, you should buy this book, or just let me know from the comment section if when I find your state, let me know if you want me to read them out, just your state, okay? Otherwise I'm not going to read out those names. The other thing is that for now Twitter is divided between two sides, even in the Hindutva side, which is the J. Sai Deepak, Anand Ranganathan, Vishnu Jain side, who are saying that we need the 40,000 temples back, and the Kushal Mehra, Abhijit Ayar Mitra side, who are saying that we just need Kashi, Mathura, Gyanvapi, and then we should stop. I have two questions to both sides, and frankly I don't know the answers, what answers they have to these two questions. My first question is to Kushal Mehra, Abhijit Ayar Mitra's side, is that you are saying that forgive and move on and forget, etc. But if no one is asking for the forgiveness, how can you forgive, okay? For truth and reconciliation to happen, the other side has to say that yes, we also want truth and reconciliation. Yes, we are admitting that mistakes have been made, and therefore please, we forgive our ancestors. It was a bad thing that has happened. We are very sorry that your temples were destroyed, and let's move on. Let's not take away our mosques now, because we love them as well. We like our places of worship. No one is saying that. Okay, so you can't, on behalf of someone else, go on saying that let's forgive. My question to the J. Sai Deepak, Vishnu Jain, Anand Ranganathan side, this side of the argument is that, first of all, is that, remember, when they are saying that no one on behalf of Hindus should go around saying that we just want these three places of worship and we forgive the rest. Similarly, they also should not go around saying on behalf of any Hindus or even Hindutwadis that we do want those 40,000 mosques, okay? 40,000 places of worship and temples. So no one should be speaking on behalf of the Hindu side, according to me. Everyone should be saying, putting out their personal opinion. And the second question is that at least according to Sitaram Goel, there is absolutely zero evidence about any Buddhist monastery being destroyed and built into a Hindu temple. But if some Jain temples do come up in this conversation, are you okay with giving any Hindu temple back to Jains as well? Which I personally don't have a problem with, because I am not a big fan of historical injustices, that narrative, and therefore, if at all we have had any past problems between Hindus and Sikhs, or Buddhist and Hindus, or Jains and Hindus, okay, I don't have a problem with any of those histories or incidents in history, because today we don't have a problem with any of these people except the Navayanis, which is a made up Buddhism basically. And therefore, I also would not have any problem in seeing a Hindu temple being handed over to any Jain community. So, but again, I also should not be speaking for the entire Hindu community, but I'm asking, therefore, the people who are saying that 40,000 temples definitely need to be reclaimed. Are you okay with any of your Hindu temples being returned to Jain places of worship, if at all they come up in history? If at all they come up, okay? I'm not saying, I don't even know if there are any actual Jain mandirs which were turned to Hindu temples. And the other question is, I don't exactly know what the book has presented as evidence, okay? I know that for about 2,000 temples, there is hard evidence. For the rest 38,000, I know that I've heard people say when they talk about this book that there is ambiguous evidence. I don't know exactly what kind of evidence there is for the other 38,000. So it doesn't mean that just because Sitaram Goel couldn't find the rest of the hard evidence for the 38,000 doesn't mean that we can't investigate more now based on our resources and technological advancements today and find out more evidence for the other 38,000 as well. But for now, I don't know if this book has given any valid evidence for the other 38,000, okay? We will find out from the book. That is why I'm reading the book, because it's relevant to this, to the conversation we are having in Twitter, at least, in the Hindutva site for the last 2-3 days. Okay, Darth Vader is saying, good to see greats like Sitaram Goel. Are they really getting their due? I hope you all buy all the entire Sitaram Goel collection is costs just 5,700 rupees, all his 22 books. I hope all of you buy all those books, even if you don't read them. Just support the Voice of India publishing house, which his family runs today. So as far as dues are concerned, I don't think he's still getting his due until his books are also taught in schools and colleges at least. Or his book How I Became a Hindu is taught in a philosophy classroom. I don't think he's getting his due. In pop culture, maybe, yeah, at least to the Hindutva side, and that even not even everyone in the Hindutva side has read his works. I will consider him. I will consider that he got his due, quote unquote, if a majority of both sides of the political spectrum have read him once they read him, just like Shashi Tharoor. Okay. Everyone from, a lot of people from Hindutva side, a lot of people from leftist side, a lot of people from Congressy side, all of these people have read Shashi Tharoor. I want Sitaram Goel to reach that level of popularity. It's just the beginning, absolutely, yeah. अभी तो 2 साल पहले हमने ज़्यादातर लोगों ने नाम सुना सीताराम गोयल का. Okay, so let's see what this book actually has. The movement for the restoration of the Ram Janmabhoomi temple at Ayodhya has brought to the fore a suppressed chapter of India's history, namely the large-scale destruction of Hindu temples by the Islamized invaders. So this book is from 1990, okay, for context. And the other thing we must remember is, just because Sitaram Goel has gotten to 40,000 temples, that doesn't mean more temples were not broken actually, because there are a lot of temples here and there, small mosques, even in like local neighborhood alleys in villages and all, which still have signs of Hindu sculpture, architecture here and there. So they are not even counted here. So 40,000 is not really the highest number. This chapter is by no means closed. The appendix to this book provides details of many temples destroyed by Muslims all over Bangladesh as recently as October-November 1989. Yes, I was going through this book a little, skimming through. So I never read appendices, okay, appendices. So in this one, I found that specific incidents, newspaper headlines from 1989 itself, have been tracked down by Sitaram Goel and presented as evidence in the end of this book, okay? If you are not from an academic background, today you will learn what hardcore research rigor, academic rigor is from this book. You have no idea the amount of hard work Sitaram Goel has put in, guys. The absolute genius, the absolute strain and nitty-gritty details that he has gone through to compile this book. Insane. Partha is saying, well, in the West, still people credit Darwin for theory of evolution through natural selection instead of Alfred Russel Wallace. I see. I don't know who Russel Wallace is. That happened, okay, 89. Currently, temples or whatever had remained of them are meeting a similar fate in the Kashmir Valley. This chapter, however, though significant, was only a part of the Muslim behavior pattern as recorded by Muslim historians of medieval India. The other parts were 1. Mass slaughter of people not only during war but also after the armies of Islam had emerged victorious, which is called war crimes and genocide. Capture of large numbers of non combatant men, women, and children as booty and their sale as slaves all over the world. That is how the Romani tribes came about, which is why people in Yemen today look like random people from Maharashtra, Mumbai, etc. Okay? Forcible conversion to Islam of people who were in no position to resist, reduction to the status of zimmis or non citizens, of all those who could not be converted, and imposition of inhuman disabilities on them, jizya, etc. Emasculation of the zimmis by preventing them from possessing arms. यही से आया है. Impoverishment of the zimmis through heavy discriminatory taxes and misappropriation of a major part of what the peasants produced. That is why at one point the Nizam of Hyderabad was the richest man in the world when the country was absolutely poor. Ruination of the native and national culture of the zimmis by suppressing and holding in contempt all its institutions and expressions. Okay, let me zoom in a little भाई, कुछ दिखाई नहीं दे रहा है ज़्यादा, थोड़ा zoom in कर लेते हैं. और थोड़ा होगा, हाँ, nice, good. Nor is this behavior pattern a thing of the past. It persisted even after the Muslim rule was over. The Muslim revivalist movements in the 19th century, particularly in Bengal, tried to repeat as far as they could the performance of the medieval Muslim swordsmen and sultans. More recently, after the Islamic state of Pakistan was carved out, Hindus have been forced to leave their ancestral homes en masse from its western wing and in a continuous stream of refugees from its eastern wing, now an independent Islamic state of Bangladesh that came into being with the help of India. Hindu temples and other cultural institutions have more or less disappeared from Pakistan while they continue to be under constant attack in Bangladesh. Okay, Nina is saying temples are already being handed back though. There was a Buddhist temple converted to Shakta worship place in Tamil Nadu which was taken to court by Ambedkarites and they got it. Okay, Hindu temples are being given back to Buddhists. Oh, तो नवायानी को क्यों मिला? अरे ये तो अजीब बात है. Hello. Yeah, audio is coming, right? Okay. How to understand this behavior pattern so persistently followed over 1,000 years under very different conditions and so consistent in its expression? What is its deeper ideological source? So what I want to know is, Niner, do the Navayanis have any authority to reclaim ancient Buddhist temples? Because Navayana Buddhism wasn't even there when those Buddhist monasteries might have been taken away by Hindus, okay? Do you agree with JSD's view that Hindus should get back all 40k temples? Abhay, just check my small 2-minute monologue in the beginning. How to understand this behavior pattern so persistently followed over 1,000 years under very... Okay. What is its deeper ideological source? It is rooted in Islam's religious teachings, its theology and its religious laws. It derives from its peculiar conception of Momins and Kafirs, from its doctrines of Jihad, Darul Islam and Darul Harb, and from what it regards as the duty of a Muslim state. Hindu India is called upon to make a deeper study of Islam than it has hitherto done. It can neglect this task at its own peril. The present volume makes no pretense of presenting such a study, but by choice restricts itself mainly to the study of Hindu temples destroyed and desecrated and converted into mosques and khankas without overlooking Muslims' ideology of iconoclasm. Here and there it also mentions other theological props and concomitants of the iconoclastic ideology. Iconoclasm means hating icons, religious icons, etc., visual images or statues, etc. In the book Ayodhya, retains its importance, but it does not occupy the center of discussion. In dealing with its subject, it exercises complete fidelity to truth. Unlike secularist and Marxist writers, it does not believe in rewriting and fabricating history. Its aim is to raise the information level of our people and to make them better aware of the more persistent ideological forces at work. Mahavira Jayanti, April 7, 1990. First article is by Arun Shourie himself. It's called Hideaway Communalism. a case in which the English version of a major book by a renowned Muslim scholar, the fourth rector of one of the greatest centers of Islamic learning in India, listing some of the mosques, including the Babri Masjid, which were built on the sites and foundations of temples using their stones and structures, is found to have the telltale passages censored out in the English version. The book is said to have become difficult to get. It is traced and is found to have been commanded just 15 years ago by the most influential living Muslim scholar of our country today, the current rector of the great center of Islamic learning and the chairman of the Muslim Personal Law Board. Evasion, concealment have become a national habit, and they have terrible consequences. But first, I must give you some background. The Nadwatul Ulema of Lucknow is one of the principal centers of Islamic learning in India. It was founded in 1894. It ranks today next only to the Darul Uloom of Deoband. The government publication, Centers of Islamic Learning in India, recalls how the founders aimed at producing capable scholars who could project a true image of Islam before the modern world in an effective way. It recalls how, towards fulfilling its avowed aim in the matter of educational reform, the group decided to establish an ideal educational institution which would not only provide education in religious and temporal sciences but also offer technical training. It recalls how the Nadwa, stands out today with its college, a vast and rich library and research and publication departments housed in fine buildings as one of the most outstanding institutions for imparting instruction in the Islamic sciences. It recalls how a salient feature of this institution is its emphasis on independent research. It recalls how the library of the Nadwa, housed in the central hall and the surrounding rooms of the main building, is, with more than 75,000 titles, including about 3,000 handwritten books, mostly in Arabic and also in Persian, Urdu, English, etc. अच्छा, ऑडियो ठीक से आ रहा है तो माइक थोड़ा आज नीचे रखा हूँ मैं. One of the finest libraries of the subcontinent. That was written 10 years ago. The library now has 1,25,000 books. Its head. Today the institution is headed by Maulana Abul Hasan Ali Nadwi. Ali Mian, as he is known to one and all, is almost without doubt the most influential Muslim teacher and figure today among the laity, meaning the lay people, in the common masses, in government circles and among scholars and governments abroad. Do you all know who Ali Mian is? Ali Mian is one of the people who said that the Ram Janmabhoomi site should be handed over to Hindus with no questions asked, without any hassle. And he was stopped from propagating that idea by Marxist historians. He was among the founders of the Jamaat-e-Islami, the fundamentalist organization, but because of differences with Maulana Maududi, Lai left it soon. Today Lai is the chairman of the Muslim Personal Law Board. He is a founder member of the Rabta Alme-Islami, the pan-Islamic body with headquarters in Mecca, which decides, among other things, the amounts that different Islamic organizations the world over should receive. He has been the Nazim, that is the rector of the Darul Uloom Nadwatul Ulema since 1961, that is for well over a quarter of a century. The Nadwa owes not a small part of its eminence to the scholarship, the exertions, title, national and international contacts of Ali Mian. Abhay is saying, JSD said that the individual owners of each temple have the right to approach the courts to get those temples back. I support if Buddhists and Jains want their places back with empirical evidence. Yeah, exactly, me too. Politicians of all hues, Rajiv Gandhi, VP Singh, Chandrasekhar, seek him out, Ali Mian. He is the author of several books, including the well-known Insani Dunya Par Musalman Ke Uruj-o Zawal Ka Asar, the impact of the rise and fall of Muslims on mankind, and is taken as the authority on Islamic law, jurisprudence, theology, and especially history. And he has great, in fact, decisive influence on the politics of Muslims in India. His father and his book. His father, Maulana Hakim Syed Abdul Hai, was an equally well-known and influential figure. When the Nadwa was founded, the first rector, Maulana Muhammad Mongeri, Munger ka Vasi hai isliye, Nivasi. Mongeri, the scholar at whose initiative the original meeting in 1892, which led to the establishment of the Nadwa, was called, had chosen Maulana Abdul Hai as the Madadgar Nazim, the additional rector. Abdul Hai served in that capacity till July 1915 when he was appointed the rector. Because of his scholarship and his services to the institution and to Islam, he was reappointed as the rector in 1920. He continued in that post till his death in February 1923. He too wrote several books, including a famous directory which has just been republished from Hyderabad of thousands of Muslims who had served the cause of Islam in India, chiefly by the numbers they had converted to the faith. During some work, I came across the reference to a book of his and began to look for it. It was a long discursive book, I learnt, which began with descriptions of the geography, flora and fauna, languages, people, and the regions of India. These were written for the Arabic speaking peoples, the book having been written in Arabic. In 1972, I learnt the Nadwatul Ulema had the book translated into Urdu and published the most important chapters of the book under the title Hindustan Islami Ahad Mein, Hindustan under Islamic rule. Ali Miah, I was told, had himself written the foreword in which he had commended the book most highly. The book, as published, had left out descriptions of geography, etc., on the premise that facts about these are well known to Indian readers. A sudden reluctance. A curious fact hit me in the face. Many of the persons who one would have normally expected to be knowledgeable about such publications were suddenly reluctant to recall this book. I was told, in fact, that copies of the book had been removed, for instance, from the Aligarh Muslim University library. Some even suggested that a determined effort had been made 3 or 4 years ago to get back each and every copy of this book. Fortunately, the suggestion turned out to be untrue. While some of the libraries one would normally expect to have the book, the Jamia Millia Islamia in Delhi, the famous libraries in Hyderabad, those of the Dairitual Marifal Osmania, of the Salarjung Museum, of the Nizam's Trust, of the Osmania University, the Kutubkhana-i Saidiya did not have it. Others did. Among the latter were those who did have it were the Nadwa's library itself, the justly famous Khuda Bakhsh library in Patna, that of the Institute of Islamic Studies in Delhi. The fact that the book was available in all these libraries came as a great reassurance. I felt that if reactionaries and propagandists have become so well organized that they can secure the disappearance from every library, a book they have come not to like, we are in deep trouble. Clearly, they were not that resourceful. The fact that, contrary to what I had been told, the book was available also taught me another reassuring thing. Factional fights among Muslim fundamentalists are as sharp and intense as are the factional fights among fundamentalists of other hues. For the suggestion of there being something sinister in the inaccessibility of the book had come to me because the suggestion of there being something sinister in the inaccessibility of the book had come to me from responsible Muslim quarters. Interesting. This valuable gift, this historical testament. Okay, Abhay is saying if people should let go of historical injustice in case of destroyed temples, then they should also oppose Reservation SC/ST Act and targeted schemes as ways to correct historical wrongs. Yeah, but they are completely two separate topics. When we are discussing temples, that doesn't mean we start a conversation about every historical wrong in every field of society, right? Historical wrongs have not just been committed in the realm of society, caste, or religion, or faith, or temples. Historical wrongs have been committed in the realm of hardcore politics, music field, corruption, banking industry. Just because we start a conversation about temples being written doesn't mean now we spend the time debating which historical wrongs to right or not right, okay? And more importantly, I don't even care about historical wrongs being injustices. This is a property dispute and it needs to be looked as such. This valuable gift, this historical testament. The book is the publication number 66 of the Majlis Tehqiqat wa Nashriyat Islam, the publication house of the Nadwatul Ulema, Lucknow. The Arabic version was published in 1972 in Hyderabad, the Urdu version in 1973 in Lucknow, and English version was published in 1977. I will use the Urdu version as the illustration. That is Arun Shourie's main research. Maulana Abul Hasan Ali Nadwi, that is Ali Miah himself, contributes the foreword. It is an eloquent, almost lyrical foreword. Islam has imbued its followers with the quest for truth, with patriotism, he writes. Their nature, their culture has made Muslims the writers of true history, he writes. Muslims had but to reach a country, he writes, and its fortunes lit up, and it awakened from, okay, so Muslims just had to reach a country and then the fortunes would of that country would lit up. It awakened from the slumber of hundreds and thousands of years. The country thereby ascended from darkness to light, he writes, from oblivion and obscurity to the pinnacle of name and fame. Leaving its parochial ambit, it joined the family of man, it joined the wide and vast creation of God. And the luminescence of Islam, he writes, transformed its hidden treasures into the light of eyes. It did not stick away the wealth of the country, he writes, and vomit it elsewhere as Western powers did. Okay, he's saying that they did not loot the country and leave, they settled here. On the contrary, it brought sophistication, culture, beneficent administration, peace, tranquility to the country. These are exact dialogues in the Jodha Akbar movie, remember when Ritik was saying. It raised the country from the age of savagery to the age of progress, he writes, from infantilism to adulthood. It transformed its barren lands into swaying fields, its wild shrubs into fruit-laden trees of such munificence that the residents could not even have dreamt of them, and so on. He then recalls the vast learning and prodigious exertions of Maulana Abdul Hai, his 8-volume work on 4,500 Muslims who served the cause of Islam in India, his Directory of Islamic Scholars. He recalls how after completing these books, the Maulana turned to subjects which had till then remained obscure. How in these labors the Maulana was like the proverbial bee collecting honey, okay? How in these labors the Maulana was like the proverbial bee collecting honey from varied flowers. He recounts the wide range of the Maulana's scholarship. He recounts how the latter collected rare data, how a person like him accomplished single-handed what entire academies are unable these days to do so. He recounts the structure of the present book. He recalls how it lay neglected for long, how even as the work of retranscribing a moth-eaten manuscript was going on, a complete manuscript was discovered in Azamgarh, how in 1933 the grace of Providence saved it from destruction and obscurity. He writes that the book brings into bold relief those hallmarks of Islamic rule which have been unjustly and untruthfully dealt with by Western and Indian historians, which in fact many Muslim historians and scholars in universities and academies too have treated with neglect and lack of appreciation. Recalling how Maulana Abdul Hai had to study thousands of pages on a subject, Ali Miah writes that only he who has himself worked on the subject can appreciate the effort that has gone into the study. You will get in a single chapter of this book, he tells the reader, the essence which you cannot obtain by reading scores of books. This is the result of the fact that the author labored only for the pleasure of God, for the service of learning, and the fulfillment of his own soul. Such authors expected no rewards, no applause. Work was their entire satisfaction. That is how they were able to put in such Herculean labors, to spend their entire life on one subject. We are immensely pleased, he concludes, to present this valuable gift and historical testament to our countrymen and hope that Allah will accept this act of service and scholars will receive it with respect and approbation. The explanation. Such being the eminence of the author, such being the greatness of the work, why is it not the cynosure of the fundamentalist's eyes? The answer is in the chapter Hindustan Ki Masjide, the mosques of Hindustan. Barely 17 pages, the chapter is simply written. A few facts about some of the principal mosques are described in a few lines each. The facts are well known, they are elementary. And setting them out in a few lines each should attract no attention. And yet, as we shall see, there is furtiveness in regard to them. Why? Descriptions of 7 mosques provide the answer. The devout constructed so many mosques, Maulana Abdul Hai records. They lavished such huge amounts and much labors on them that they cannot all be reckoned, that every city, town, hamlet came to be adorned by a mosque. He says that he will therefore have to be content with sitting out the facts of just a few of the well-known ones. A few sentences from what he says about the 7 mosques will do. Quwwat al-Islam Mosque. According to my findings, the first mosque of Delhi is Quwwat al-Islam or Quwwat al-Islam. It is said Kutubuddin Aibak constructed in Hijri calendar 587 after demolishing the temple built by Prithviraj and leaving certain parts of the temple. This is written by Ali Miah himself, okay? Or Abdul Hai. I got confused a little. But anyway, any one of those two. This is from their side only. রূপম ইসলাম আবার জেহাদি হলো কবে? Leaving certain parts of the temple when he returned from Ghazni. Okay. The temple built by Prithviraj and leaving certain parts of the temple outside the mosque proper. And when he returned from Ghazni in Hijri 592, he started building under orders from Shihabuddin Ghori, a huge mosque of inimitable red stones, and certain parts of the temple were included in the mosque. After that, when Shamsuddin Altamish became the king, he built on both sides of it edifices of white stones, and on one side of it, he started constructing that loftiest of all towers which has no equal in the world for its beauty and strength. This is Qutub Minar, okay? After demolishing the temple built by Prithviraj. The mosque at Jaunpur. This was built by Sultan Ibrahim Shadki with chiseled stones. Originally, it was a Hindu temple after demolishing, which he constructed the mosque. It is known as the Atala Masjid. The Sultan used to offer his Friday and Eid prayers in it, and Qazi Shihabuddin gave lessons on it. The mosque at Kanauj. This mosque stands on an elevated ground inside the fort of Kanauj. It is well known that it was built on the foundations of some Hindu temple. Foundation of some Hindu temple. What? एक minute. Bracket में क्या था? अच्छा, some Hindu temple that stood here. It is a beautiful mosque. They say that it was built by Ibrahim Shadki in Hijri 809, as is recorded in Gharabat Nigar. Jami Masjid at Etawah. This mosque stands on the bank of the Jamuna at Etawah. Where is Etawah? There was a Hindu temple at this place, on the site of which this mosque was constructed. It is also patterned after the mosque at Kanauj. Probably it is one of the monuments of the Shadki Sultans. Babri Masjid at Ayodhya. This mosque was constructed by Babar at Ayodhya, which Hindus call the birthplace of Ramchandraji. There is a famous story about his wife Sita. It is said that Sita had a temple here in which she lived and cooked food for her husband. On that very site, Babar constructed this mosque in Hijri 963. Mosques of Alamgir Aurangzeb. It is said that the mosque of Banaras was built by Alamgir on the site of the Bishweshwar temple. That temple was very tall and held as holy among the Hindus. On this very site, and with those very stones, he constructed a lofty mosque, and its ancient stones were rearranged after being embedded in the walls of the mosque. It is one of the renowned mosques of Hindustan. The second mosque at Banaras is the one which was built by Alamgir Aurangzeb on the bank of the Ganga with chiseled stones. This also is a renowned mosque of Hindustan. It has 28 towers, each of which is 238 feet tall. This is on the bank of the Ganga, and its foundations extend to the depth of the waters. Alamgir built a mosque at Mathura. It is said that this mosque was built on the site of the Gobind Dev temple, which was very strong and beautiful as well as exquisite. It is said, but the Maulana is not testifying to the facts. He is merely reporting what was believed. He repeatedly said, it is said that. Everyone is an Umar Khalid supporter. They don't have to be a jihadi for it. Even Renaissance era, rationalism, Enlightenment era thinkers are also Umar Khalid supporters, because they think freedom of speech should now all of a sudden exist. That doesn't make him a jihadi. Have you read any of his lyrics, or have you read any of his books? That seems to be a figure of speech with the Maulana. When describing the construction of the Quwwatul Islam mosque by Qutubuddin Aibak, for instance, he uses the same "it is said." If the fact were in doubt, would a scholar of the level of Alimiya's diligence and commitment not have commented on them in his full-bodied foreword? Indeed, he would have decided against republishing them, as he decided not to republish much of the original book. And if the scholars had felt that the passages could be that easily disposed of, why should any effort have been made to take a work to the excellence of which a scholar of Alimiya's stature has testified in such a fulsome manner, and do what has been done to this one? And what is that? Each reference to each of these mosques having been constructed on the sites of temples with, as in the case of the mosque at Banaras, the stones of the very temple which was demolished for that very purpose have been censored out of the English version of the book. Each one of the passages on each one of the 7 mosques. No accident that. Indeed, there is not just censorship but substitution. In the Urdu volume, we are told in regard to the mosque at Kanauj, for instance, that this mosque stands on an elevated ground inside the fort of Kanauj. It is well known that it was built on the foundation of some Hindu temple that stood there. In the English volume, we are told in regard to the same mosque that it occupied a commanding site believed to have been at the place earlier occupied by an old decayed fort. If the passages could have been so easily explained away by referring to the "it is said," why would anyone have thought it necessary to remove these passages from the English version, that is the version which was more likely to be read by persons other than the faithful Muslims? Why would anyone itna English mujhe nahi aata hai bhai. Why would anyone eliminate the or distort the book of a major scholar in this way? Conclusions. But that, though obvious, weighs little with me. The fact that temples were broken and mosques constructed in their place is well known. The fact that the materials of the temples, the stones and idols were used in constructing the mosque is news. It was thought that this was the way to announce hegemony. It was thought that this was the way to strike at the heart of the conquered, for in those days the temple was not just a place of worship. It was the hub of the community's life, of its learning, of its social life. So the lines in the book which bear on this practice are of no earth-shaking significance in themselves. Their real significance, and I dare say that they are but the smallest, most innocuous examples and that one can think of on the mosque temple business, lies in the evasion and concealment they have spurred. I have it on good authority that the passages have been known for long and well known to those who have been stoking the Babri Masjid issue. That is the significant thing. They have known them, and their impulse has been to conceal and bury rather than to ascertain the truth. I have little doubt that a rational solution can be found for the Babri Masjid Ram Janmabhoomi tangle, a solution which will respect the sentiments, the essentials of the religions of all. But no solution can be devised if the issue is going to be made the occasion for a show of strength by either side. It is going to be converted into a symbol for establishing who shall prevail. The fate of Maulana Abdul Hai's passages, and I do not know whether the Urdu version itself was not a conveniently sanitized version of the original Arabic volume, illustrates the cynical manner in which those who stoke the passions of religion to further their politics are going about the matter. Those who proceed by such cynical calculations sow havoc for all of us, for Muslims, for Hindus, for all. Those who remain silent in the face of such cynicism, such calculations, help them sow the havoc. Will we shed our evasions and concealments? Will we at last learn to speak and face the whole truth? To see how communalism of one side justifies and stokes that of the other? To see that these leaders are not interested in facts, not in religion, not in a building or a site, but in power, in their personal power, and in that alone. That for them religion is but an instrument which is so attractive because the costs of wielding it falls on others, on their followers, and not on them. Will we never call a halt to them? 1989 article by Arun Shourie. Okay, now the next article is by, let's see, who is it by? Sitaram Goel only, okay. Playing with Pranub is saying, Shiram Bhabe to keui international noy. No, listen to this. There are political slogans and there are facts that we must analyze so that all of us don't be just political cadre of a political party of any ideology all the time, okay? Political slogans have their place and have their importance because not everyone in any society, in any country is going to be a rational thinker in any way. So political slogans are great for mass mobilization. But if you yourself love the smell of your own fart, or if you believe in the political slogans yourself, then you are going to reach wrong conclusions and hollow solutions. Okay, that is the problem of believing in political slogans word for word. So just like everyone who opposes the government is not an anti-national, but some people are, like Arundhati Roy, who says that the country should be broken up if just the people of Kashmir want it. But J. Sai Deepak is not if he criticizes the government. In the same way, there are actual jihadis who want a jihad that kills Hindus. Rupam Islam does not support that. Rupam Islam has not read the history of Hindutva. He has not delved into the things we have read, and therefore thinks Umar Khalid is some random leftist protester who's being locked up by the government. And you also don't know that Rupam Islam is the only Bengali musician in the history of Bengali music to openly call out Stalin as a fascist, evil dictator in front of a live audience of 5,000 people. Okay, The Tip of an Iceberg by Sitaram Goel. The mention made by Maulana Abdul Hai in Indian Express in Arun Shouri's article of Hindu temples turned into mosques is only the tip of an iceberg. The iceberg itself lies submerged in the writings of medieval Muslim historians, accounts of foreign travelers, and the reports of the Archaeological Survey of India. A hue and cry has been raised in the name of secularism and national integration whenever the iceberg has chanced to surface, in spite of hectic efforts to keep it suppressed. Marxist politicians masquerading as historians have been the major contributors to this conspiracy of silence. Muslim politicians and scholars in present-day India resent any reference whatsoever to the destruction of Hindu temples in medieval times. They react as if it is a canard being spread by those they stigmatize as Hindu communalists. There was, however, a time not so long ago when their predecessors viewed the same performance as an act of piety and proclaimed it with considerable pride in inscriptions and literary compositions. Hindus of medieval India hardly wrote any history of what happened to their places of worship at the hands of Islamic iconoclasts. Whatever evidence the Hindu communalists cite in this context comes entirely from Islamic sources, epigraphic and literary. Now, the epigraphic evidence. There are many mosques all over India which are known to local tradition and the Archaeological Survey of India as built on the site of land, quite frequently from the materials of demolished Hindu temples. Most of them carry inscriptions invoking Allah and the Prophet, quoting the Quran and giving details of when, how, and by whom they were constructed. The inscriptions have been deciphered and connected to their historical context by learned Muslim epigraphists. They have been published by the Archaeological Survey of India in its Epigraphia Indica Arabic and Persian supplement, an annual which appeared first in 1907 and 1908 as Epigraphia Indo-Moslemica. The following few inscriptions have been selected in order to show that 1. Destruction of Hindu temples continued throughout the period of Muslim domination. 2. It covered all parts of India east, west, north and south. And 3. All Muslim dynasties, imperial and provincial, participated in the pious performance. Quwwat al-Islam Masjid, Qutub Minar, Delhi. This fort was conquered and the Jami Masjid built in the year 587 by the Amir, the slave of the Sultan. May Allah strengthen his helpers. The materials of 27 idols, on each of which 2 million Delhiwalas had been spent, were used in the construction of the mosque. The Amir was Qutubuddin Aibak, slave of Muizuddin Muhammad Ghori. The year 587 Hijri corresponds to 1192 AD. Delhiwal was a high domination coin current at that time in Delhi. I see. Masjid at Manvi in the Raichur district of Karnataka. Praise be to Allah that by the decree of the Parvardigar, a mosque has been converted out of a temple as a sign of religion in the reign of the Sultan, who is the Asylum of Faith Firuz Shah Bahmani, who is the cause of exuberant spring in the garden of religion. The inscription mentions the year 1406 to 1407 AD as the time of construction. Jami Masjid at Malan, Palanpur Taluka, Banaskantha district of Gujarat. The Jami Masjid was built by Khan-e-Azam Ulugh Khan, who suppressed the wretched infidels. He eradicated the idolatrous houses and mine of infidelity, along with the idols with the edge of the sword, and made ready this edifice. He made its walls and doors out of the idols. The back of every stone became the place for prostration of the believer. The date of construction is mentioned as 1462 AD in the reign of Mahmud Shah I of Begada of Gujarat. Hammam Darwaza Masjid at Jaunpur in Uttar Pradesh. Thanks that by the guidance of the everlasting and the living Allah, this house of infidelity became the niche of prayer. As a reward for that, the generous Lord constructed an abode for the builder in paradise. Its chronogram yields the year 1567 AD in the reign of Akbar. the great Mughal. A local historian, Fasihuddin, tells us that the temple had been built earlier by the Diwan Lakshman Das, an official of the Mughal government. Jami Masjid at Ghoda in the Pune district of Maharashtra. O Allah, O Muhammad, O Ali. When Mir Muhammad Zaman made up his mind, he opened the door of prosperity on himself by his own hand. He demolished 33 idol temples and by the divine grace laid the foundation of a building in this abode of perdition. The inscription is dated 1586 AD when the Pune region was ruled by the Nizam Shahi Sultans of Ahmednagar. Gachinala Masjid at Kumbam in the Kurnool district of Andhra Pradesh. He is Allah. May he be glorified. During the August rule of Muhammad Shah, there was a well-established idol house in Kummum. Muhammad Salih, who prospers in the rectitude of the affairs of faith, razed to the ground the edifice of the idol house and broke the idols in manly fashion. He constructed on its site a suitable mosque towering above the buildings of all. The date of construction is mentioned as 1729 to 30 AD in the reign of the Mughal Emperor Muhammad Shah. Though sites of demolished Hindu temples were mostly used for building mosques and idgahs, temple materials were often used in other Muslim monuments as well. Archaeologists have discovered such materials, architectural as well as sculptural, in quite a few forts, palaces, maqbaras, Sufi khankas, madrasas, etc. In Srinagar, Kashmir, temple materials can be seen in long stretches of the stone embankments on both sides of the Jhelum. 2 inscriptions on the walls of the Gopi Talav, a stepped well at Surat, tells us that the well was constructed by Haidar Kuli, the Mughal governor of Gujarat, in 1718 AD in the reign of Farrukh Siyar. One of them says its bricks were taken from an idol temple. The other informs us that Haidar Kuli Khan, during whose period tyranny has become extinct, laid waste several idol temples in order to make this strong building firm. Okay, now literary evidence. Literary evidence of Islamic iconoclasm vis-a-vis in terms of Hindu places of worship is far more extensive. Let me have a sip of coffee. Okay, Abhay was asking some question. Abhay, Dada, what do you think about the argument that taking all 40k temples back will create bad blood between Hindus and Muslims? See, it does not matter what it will lead to. It matters is why do we need it back and how do we get it back? What results it will get to? That argument can be used for anything and everything. That don't do this, it will antagonize them or that person or that person. It will lead to violence, etc. Don't arrest that local mafia नेता, नहीं तो बवाल हो जाएगा. वो एक्सक्यूज यहाँ पे पॉइंट ही नहीं है. तो पॉइंट है कि 40,000 अगर लेने का बात उठ जाए, अगर एविडेंस भी सामने आ जाए, then let's see. If they also say, that side also says that yes, now is the time for truth and reconciliation. We either apologize for our ancestors' actions and we give them, or we apologize for the actions of our ancestors and therefore please forgive us and don't take them away. That conversation is not even beginning. We are basically doing a shadowboxing match here. We Hindutva people are talking amongst ourselves. This conversation has to happen with them, not amongst ourselves. It does not matter what the debate ends up being between Desai Deepak and Kushal Mehra. Okay, this conversation is entirely between Hindutva and anti-Hindutva. Why is bit not thought? Okay. So, I hope this point is clear. I hope I was fully coherent. That how can we even talk of this idea that what will this lead to? Okay, we have to pressure test this idea of friendship and religious harmony, and because so far it has not been pressure tested. So far it has been just a faith, blind faith that yes, I think there is religious harmony. I just have a strong belief in my heart that there is religious harmony. Every talk of religious harmony, every talk of all gods being same is being said by the Hindu side. Today we have to now ask whether they are also ready to say these things. And I'm sure there are some Muslims who are ready to say these things. But they have to. We can't assume things anymore. We have to stop assuming these things from their side. They have to come out in hordes. Their lawyers, their intellectuals, their professors, their celebrities have to come out and say, yes, bad things happened, therefore take them away, or bad things happened and we apologize for our ancestors and therefore please don't take them away. After that, I might end up on the Kushal Mehra Abhijita Mitra side. Before that, I'm not going to pick one side. Before that, it's I'll try to take them back anything as much as possible. फॉरगिवनेस का बात है ना यहाँ पे, नहीं लेंगे क्यों? क्योंकि यहाँ पे फॉरगिवनेस का इशू आता है या फिर बवाल का इशू आता है. बवाल का इशू तो पुलिस को संभालना है, बट फॉरगिवनेस का इशू आएगा जब कोई फॉरगिवनेस मांगेगा. उसके पहले देयर इज नो क्वेश्चन of assuming that bad things happened and we should move on. They have to say bad things happened and we should move on. Okay, literary evidence. Literary evidence of Islamic iconoclasm vis-a-vis in terms of Hindu temples, Hindu places of worship is far more extensive. It covers a longer span of time from the 5th decade of the 7th century, so 5th decade, 750 AD se leke, to the closing years of the 18th. It also embraces a larger space. This is the literary evidence of Islamic iconoclasm vis-a-vis Hindu temples. It also embraces a larger space from Transoxiana. ये कहाँ पे है भाई? Transoxiana in the north. Which place is being called Transoxiana? Transoxiana in the north to Tamil Nadu in the south, and from Afghanistan in the west to Assam in the east. Marxist historians and Muslim apologists would have us believe that medieval Muslim analysts meaning historians, okay? Not ly, okay? Annals पे जिसके research रहता है, okay? Analysts were indulging in poetic exaggerations in order to please their pious patrons. This has been a Marxist argument for long, that they were just exaggerating about their temple demolition actions. They did not actually demolish so many temples. Archaeological explorations in modern times have, however, provided physical proofs of literary descriptions. The vast cradle of Hindu culture is literally littered with ruins of temples and monasteries belonging to all sects of Sanatan Dharma, Buddhist, Jain, Shaiva, Shakta, Vaishnava and the rest. Almost all medieval Muslim historians credit their heroes with desecration of Hindu idols and or destruction of Hindu temples. Okay, so that's Russia. Thank you, Hindu Vichardhara. So all the Kazakhstan, Mongolia, Russia area, all that entire Central Asia बोलते हैं हम जिसको. So in north of India and upwards. The picture that emerges has the following components. Depending upon whether the iconoclast was in a hurry on account of Hindu resistance or did his work at leisure after a decisive victory, okay? This is a great way of analyzing things, okay? जल्दी में ऐसा ही कर दिया कि अच्छा आराम से ही तोड़फोड़ किया. The idols were mutilated or smashed or burned or melt down if they were made of precious metals. Sculptures in relief on walls and pillars were disfigured or scraped away or torn down. Idols of stone and inferior metals or their pieces were taken away, sometimes by cartloads, to be thrown down before the main mosque in A, the metropolis of the ruling Muslim Sultan, and B, the holy cities of Islam, particularly Makkah, Medina and Baghdad. There were instances of idols being turned into lavatory seats or handed over to butchers to be used as weights while selling meat. Brahmin priests and other holy men in and around the temple were molested and murdered. Sacred vessels and scriptures used in worship were defiled and scattered or burnt. Temples were damaged or despoiled or demolished or burned down or converted into mosques with some structural alterations, or entire mosques were raised on the same sites, mostly with temple materials. Cows were slaughtered on the temple sites so that Hindus could not use them again. The literary sources like Epigraphic provide evidence of the elation meaning happiness, euphoria, which Muslims felt while witnessing or narrating these pious deeds. A few citations from Amir Khusro, who wrote the song Chhap Tilak Sab Chini, meaning I gave away my tilak because I fell in love with a Muslim woman. A few citations from Amir Khusro will illustrate the point. The instances cited relate to the doings of Jalaluddin Firoz Khalji, Alauddin Khalji, and the letters of military commanders. served as a court poet of six successive sultans at Delhi and wrote a Masnavi in a praise of each of them. He was the dearest disciple of Sheikh Nizamuddin Aulia and has come to be honored as some sort of a Sufi himself. In our own times, he is being hailed as the father of a composite Hindu-Muslim culture and the pioneer of secularism. Dr. R.C. Majumdar, whom the Marxist malign as a communist historian, names him as a liberal Muslim. Interesting, yeah. And so Nizamuddin Aulia is also talked of in many Bengali folk songs as well. Dilli te Nizamuddin Aulia hello. Okay, Jain. Next morning, he, Jalaluddin, so these are written by Nizamuddin Aulia himself, who, according to R.C. Majumdar, is a liberal Muslim, but R.C. Majumdar is called a Hindu communist historian. Jain. Next morning, he, Jalaluddin, went again to the temples and ordered their destruction. While the soldiers sought every opportunity of plundering, the Shah was engaged in burning the temples and destroying the idols. There were 2 bronze idols of Brahma, each of which weighed more than 1,000 mans. These were broken into pieces and the fragments were distributed among the officers. With orders to throw them down at the gates of the masjid on their return to Delhi, Miftah ul Futu, वहाँ से लिया गया है ये quote. Devgiri, he, Alauddin, destroyed the temples of the idolaters and erected pulpits and arches of the mosques. From the same book, it is taken from the same book. Somnath, they made the temple prostrate itself towards the Kaaba. You may say that the temple first offered its prayers and then had a bath, that is, the temple was made to topple and fall into the sea. He, Ulugh Khan, destroyed all the idols and temples, but sent one idol, the biggest of all idols, to the courts of his godlike majesty, and on that account, in that ancient stronghold of idolatry, the summons to prayers was proclaimed so loudly that they heard it in Misr and Madain in Iraq. This is from Tariq-i-Alai, now Delhi. He, Alauddin, ordered the circumference of the new minar to be made double of the old one, Qutub Minar. The stones were dug out from the hills and the temples of the infidels were demolished to furnish a supply. From the same book, Tariq-i-Alai. Ranthambore. This strong fort was taken by the slaughter of the stinking Rai. Jain was also captured, an iron fort, an ancient abode of idolatry, and a new city of the people of the faith. Arose. The temple of Bhairava Dev, and temples of other gods were all razed to the ground. Brahmastpuri, which is Chidambaram. Here he, Malik Kafur, heard that in Brahmastpuri there was a golden idol. He then determined on razing the temple to the ground. It was the holy place of the Hindus, which the Malik dug up from its foundations with the greatest care, and the heads of Brahmans and idolaters danced from their necks and fell to the ground at their feet, and blood flowed in torrents. The stone idols called Ling Mahadev, which had been established a long time at the place and on which the women of the infidels rubbed their vaginas for sexual satisfaction, these, up to this time, the kick of the horse of Islam had not attempted to break. The Musalmans destroyed in the lings, and the Dev Narain fell down. And other gods who had fixed their seats there raised feet and jumped so high that at one leap they reached the fort of Lanka, and in that affright the lings themselves would have fled had they had any legs to stand on. Madura. They found the city empty, for the Rai had fled, because the Rai had fled with the Rai, not Rai. They found the city empty because the Rai had fled with the Ranis, but had left 200 or 300 elephants in the temple of Jagannatha. The elephants were captured and the temple burned. Fatan or Patan. There was another Rai in these parts, a Brahmin named Pandya Guru. His capital was Fatan, where there was a Brahmin was the Rai, a king, where there was a temple with an idol in it laden with jewels. The Rai fled when the army of the Sultan arrived at Fatan. They then struck the idol with an iron hatchet and opened its head. Although it was the very Qibla of the accursed infidels, it kissed the earth and filled the holy treasury. Ashika. Mabar, parts of South India. On the right hand and on the left hand, the army has conquered from sea to sea and several capitals of the gods of the Hindus in which Satanism has prevailed since the time of the jinns have been demolished. This article was published in the Indian Express by Sitaram Goel. Damn. Have been demolished. All these impurities of infidelity have been cleansed by the Sultan's destruction of idol temples, beginning with his first holy expedition to Devgir, so that the flames of the light of the law of Islam illumine all these unholy countries and places, for the cries of prayers are exalted on high and prayers are read in mosques. Allah be praised. All these are from the book Tariki Alai. The story of how Islamic invaders sought to destroy the very foundations of Hindu society and culture is long and extremely painful. It would certainly be better for everybody to forget the past, but for the prescriptions of Islamic theology which remain intact and make it obligatory for believers to destroy idols and temples. Next article, some historic questions. This is also by Sitaram Goel. Why did Islamic invaders continue to destroy Hindu temples and desecrate the idols of Hindu temples and goddesses throughout the period of their domination? Why did they raise mosques on sites occupied earlier by Hindu places of worship? These questions were asked by Hindu scholars in modern times after the terror of Islam had ceased and could no more seal their lips. In India, and in India alone, two explanations have come forth. One is provided by the theology of Islam based on the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet. The other has been proposed by Marxist professors and lapped up by apologists of Islam. We shall take up the second explanation first. The credit for pioneering the Marxist proposition about destruction of Hindu temples goes to the late Professor Muhammad Habib of the Aligarh Muslim University, father of Irfan Habib. In his book Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni, first published in 1924, he presented the thesis that Mahmud's destruction of Hindu temples was actuated not by zeal for the faith but by lust for plunder. According to him, India at that time was bursting with vast hoards of gold and silver accumulated down the ages from rich mines and a prosperous export trade. Most of the wealth, he said without providing any proof, was concentrated in temple treasuries. It was impossible, wrote the professor, that the Indian temples should not sooner or later tempt someone strong and unscrupulous enough for the impious deed. Nor was it expected that a man of Mahmud's character would allow the tolerance which Islam indicates to restrain him from taking possession of the gold when the Indians themselves had simplified his work by concentrating the wealth of the country at a few places. Professor Habib did not hide any of the salient facts regarding destruction of Hindu temples by Mahmud, though the descriptions he gave were brief, sometimes only in footnotes. He also narrated how Mahmud's exploits were celebrated at Baghdad by the Caliph and the Khalifa and the populace, and how the hero was compared to the companions of the Prophet who had achieved similar victories in Arabia, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. Only the conclusion he drew was radically different from that drawn by Mahmud's contemporaries as well as latter-day historians and theologians of Islam. Islam, he wrote, sanctioned neither the vandalism nor the plundering motives of the invader. No principle of the Sharia justifies the uncalled for attack on Hindu princes who had done Mahmud and his subjects no harm. The wanton destruction of places of worship is condemned by the law of every creed, and yet Islam, though it was not an inspiring motive, could be utilized as a posterior's justification for what was done. So the precepts of the Quran were misinterpreted or ignored, and the tolerant policy of the second caliph was cast aside in order that Mahmud and his myrmidons may be able to plunder Hindu temples with a clear and untroubled conscience. This proposition of Mahmud's guilt and Islam's innocence appealed to the architect of India's secularism, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. In a letter dated June 1, 1932, he wrote to his daughter Indira Gandhi that Mahmud was hardly a religious man, that he was a Mohammedan, of course, but that was by the way, and that Mahmud would have done what he did to whatever religion he might have belonged. In fact, Pandit Nehru went much farther than Professor Habib. much farther than Professor Habib. The the latter had written how Mahmud gave orders to burn down thousands of temples at Mathura after he had admired their architectural excellence. Pandit Nehru narrated how Mahmud admired the temples but omitted the fact that they were destroyed by him. Thus, a determined destroyer of Hindu temples was transformed into an ardent admirer of Hindu architecture. So Nehru said he was an admirer of Hindu architecture. This portrayal of Mahmud remained unchanged in his book Discovery of India, which was published in 1946. In days to come, Professor Habib's thesis that lust for plunder and not the Islamic theology of iconoclasm occasioned the destruction of Hindu temples became the party line for Marxist historians who in due course came to control all institutions concerning with researching, writing and teaching of Indian history. This was extended to cover all acts of Muslim iconoclasm in medieval Indian history. It became a crime against secularism and national integration even to mention Islam or its ideology or its theology in this context. Any historian who dared cite facts recorded by medieval Muslim historians was denounced as a Hindu communalist. Three Marxist professors wrote a book attacking Dr. R.C. Majumdar in particular, simply because the great historian was not prepared to sacrifice truth at the altar of communist politics. The book was printed by a communist publishing house and prescribed for graduate and postgraduate courses in Indian universities. They wanted to be communist, but they never criticized the Marxist government for doing the genocide of Hindu Dalits in Modi Chapi, remember? Okay, as we learned yesterday. What was more, the Marxist professors discovered a political motive as well. Hindu temples were seen as centers of political conspiracies which Muslim sultans were forced to suppress. And if the temples got destroyed in the process, no blame could be laid at the door of the sultans who were working hard in the interest of public order and peace. In a letter published in the Times of India on October 21, 1985, 12 Marxist professors rallied in defense of Aurangzeb, who had destroyed the Keshav Deva temple at Mathura and raised an Idgah in its place. The Dera Keshava Rai temple, they wrote, was built by Raja Bir Singh Bundela in the reign of Jahangir. This large temple soon became extremely popular and acquired considerable wealth. Aurangzeb had this temple destroyed, took its wealth as booty and built an Idgah on the site. His action might have been politically motivated as well, for at the time when the temple was destroyed, he faced problems with the Bundelas as well as Jat rebellion in the Mathura region. And remember, Rajaram Jat was the person who came to prominence when the Mughals were nearing the end of their rule, and he dug up the skeleton of Akbar and fed those skeletons to dogs and fed some of the pieces of the skeletons. He set them on fire. So in the actual burial of Akbar today, there is no actual skeleton of Akbar. Rajaram Jat dug out those and destroyed them. The climax was reached when the same Marxist professors started explaining away Islamic iconoclasm in terms of what they described as Hindu destruction of Buddhist and Jain places of worship. They have never been able to cite more than half a dozen cases of doubtful veracity. A few passages in Sanskrit literature coupled with speculations about some archaeological sites have sufficed for floating the history, as today even sold ad nauseum in the popular press, that Hindus destroyed Buddhist and Jain temples on a large scale. Half a dozen have become thousands, and then hundreds of thousands in the frenzied imagination suffered from a deep-seated anti-Hindu animus. Lately, they have added to the list the destruction of animist shrines from pre-Hindu India, whatever that means. And these facts, whatever that means. Sitaram Goel, when he wants to troll, he can troll. And these facts have been presented with a large dose of suppressio veri suggestio falsi. A few instances will illustrate the point. A very late Buddhist book from Sri Lanka accuses Pushyamitra Shunga, a 2nd century BC king, of offering prizes to those who brought to him heads of Buddhist monks. This single reference has sufficed for presenting Pushyamitra as the harbinger of a Brahmanical reaction which culminated in the age of the Guptas. The fact that the famous Buddhist stupas and monasteries at Bharhut and Shanchi were built and thrived under the very nose of Pushyamitra is never mentioned. Nor is the fact that the Gupta kings and queens built and endowed many Buddhist monasteries at Bodh Gaya, Nalanda, and Sarnath, among many other places. A Pandyan king of Madura, is this Madurai modern day? A Pandyan king of Madura is reported to have been a persecutor of Jains. This is mentioned in a book of the Shaiva faith to which he belonged. But the source also says that before becoming a convert to Shaivism, the king was a devout Jain and had persecuted the Shaivites. This part of the story is never mentioned by the Marxist professors while they bewail the persecution of Jains. According to the Rajtarangini of Kalhana, King Harsha of Kashmir plundered Hindu and Buddhist temples in his lust for gold and silver, which went into the making of idols. This fact is played up by Marxist professors with great fanfare, but they never mention Kalhana's comment that in doing what he did, Harsha acted like a Turuksha Muslim and was prompted by the Turukshas in his employ. The Muslims who were in his employment, they had kind of goaded him into doing this. It was still stupid of him to do, but there was involvement of Turushkas. Okay. Honeyman is saying rub their vaginas, eta shotti kore na Muslim bol. We will never know. At least this is written by Amir Khusro. This placing of Hindu kings on par with Muslim invaders in the context of iconoclasm suffers from serious shortcomings. Firstly, it lacks all sense of proportion when it tries to explain away the destruction of hundreds of thousands of Brahmanical, Buddhist and Jain temples by Islamic invaders in terms of the doubtful destruction of a few Buddhist and Jain shrines by Hindu kings. Secondly, it has yet to produce evidence that Hindus ever had a theology of iconoclasm, which made this practice a permanent part of Hinduism. Isolated acts by a few fanatics whom no Hindu historian or Pandit has ever admired cannot explain away a full-fledged theology which inspired Islamic iconoclasm. Lastly, it speaks rather poorly of Marxist ethics, which seems to say that one wrong can be explained away in terms of another wrong. Coming to the economic and political motives for the destruction of Hindu temples, it does not need an extraordinary imagination to see that the Marxist thesis is contrived and far-fetched, if not downright ridiculous. It does not explain even a fraction of the facts relating to the destruction of Hindu temples as known from literary and archaeological sources. Even if we grant that Hindu temples in India continued to be rich and centers for political unrest for more than 1,000 years, it defies understanding why they alone were singled out for plunder and destruction. There was no dearth of Muslim places of worship which were far richer and greater centers of conspiracy. The desecration of Hindu idols and razing of mosques on temple sites is impossible to explain in terms of any economic or political motive whatsoever. Small wonder that the Marxist thesis ends by inventing facts instead of explaining facts. Professor Habib cannot be accused of ignorance about the theology or history of Islam. The most that can be said in his defense is that he was trying to salvage Islam by sacrificing Mahmud of Ghazni, who had become the greatest symbol of Islamic intolerance in the Indian context. One wonders whether he anticipated the consequences of extending his logic to subsequent sultans of medieval India. The result has been disastrous for Islam. In the process, it has been reduced to a convenient cover for plunder and brigandage, meaning dacoity. The heroes of Islam in India have been converted into bandits and vandals. It is amazing that apologists of Islam in India have plumped for Professor Habib's thesis as elaborated by succeeding Marxist scribes. They would have rendered service to Islam if they had continued admitting honestly that iconoclasm has been an integral part of the theology of Islam. Their predecessors in medieval India made no bones about such an admission, nor do the scholars of Islam outside India, particularly in Pakistan. What we need most in this country is an interreligious dialogue जो dialogue अभी तक शुरू नहीं हुआ है. What we need most in this country is an interreligious dialogue in which all religions are honest and frank about their drawbacks and limitations. Such a dialogue is impossible if we hide or suppress or invent facts and offer dishonest interpretations. Mahatma Gandhi had said that Islam was born only yesterday and is still in the process of interpretation. Hiding facts and floating fictions is hardly the way for promoting that process. This is also from Indian Express. in the name of religion, Sitaram Goel. We shall now take up the explanation provided by the theology of Islam derived from the Quran and the Hadith. Ibn Ishaq, the first biographer of the Prophet, devotes many pages to a description of Arab polytheism at the time when Islam started taking shape. Every Arab household, he tells us, had an idol of some god or goddess. He also gives the name of many idols which were housed in sanctuaries maintained by different tribes across the Arab peninsula. The Kaaba at Makkah, which housed 360 idols, was only one of these sanctuaries, though it was the most prestigious. One of the idols in Kaaba was named Allah. Though it had some primacy over other idols, it was far from being an exclusive deity. Besides, there were many sacred groves and places of pilgrimage visited by Arabs on special occasions. At the same time, Ibn Ishaq informs us that monotheism was becoming an attractive creed among some sections of the Arab elite. It was the creed of the Roman, Iranian, and Abyssinian empires which inspired awe and admiration among the Arabs at that time. Many Jews and Christians were present, individually or in communities, in the more important Arab towns. These people of the book took great pride in their worship of the one and only God and looked down upon the Arabs who had no prophet, who possessed no book, and who worshipped stones and stocks. They aroused a sense of inferiority in the minds of those Arabs who came in close contact with them but who were not equipped with an alternate theology that could defend their own gods and goddesses. Such Arabs looked forward to the day when Arabia also would have a prophet and a book of its own. Those who have compared the Bible and the Quran know how close the two are in spirit and language on the subject of idols and idol worshippers. Like Jehovah of the Bible, Allah also advances his claim to be the one and only God. He denounces the mushriks, idolaters, as the doubly damned category of kafirs, unbelievers, when compared to the other category, the people of the book. The idols proclaims Allah while abrogating the so-called satanic verses are mere names invented by the ancestors of the Arabs. They have neither eyes nor ears nor hands nor feet and can therefore neither help nor harm. They cannot respond to prayers and will fail to save their worshippers from Bel on the day of judgment. They will themselves burn in the fire of hell together with those who worship them. Meanwhile, they render their worshippers napak, abominable, in the eyes of Allah. In the early days of Islam, Muslims were too weak to practice iconoclasm at Makkah. They had to rest content with expressing their contempt for idols. Food which had first been offered to idols was spurned. Names which referred to some pagan god or goddesses were changed as soon as the bearers entered the fold of Islam. But the clarion call had come. Heard them together, said Allah, those who commit transgression and those whom they worship, and start them on the road to hellfire. The Prophet saw Amr bin Lubay dragging his intestines in fire. Amr was a 2nd century king, supposed to have